Let's sit tall and close the eyes. And place one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, and simply connect to the breath. The sacred breath. The gift. Have a profound awareness for both the inhale and the exhale. And feel that each one is carrying you, supporting you, completing you. If it's possible, allow your heart to overflow with gratitude. That we should all be recipients of this very sacred divine gift at this time in this life. Let us not waste it, and instead be present in as many moments as possible to the greatness of it. And then draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll chant one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Taking a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana antva ganapati gum havamahe kavim kavinam upamashravastamam Jyestarajam brahmanan brahmanaspata anashrinvanuti bisidhasadhanam Mahaganapataye namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Yajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. So good to see all of you today. So I have a thought for a topic, but I'll ask you, is there anything that you want to talk about? I always love that reaction. Response reaction. Yeah? All right, well, you can always ask questions or request topics. And so today what I was thinking were actually two things. The first is spirituality. What is it? There seems to be so much in the world today that's confused about what spirituality actually is. There's a whole swath of the population that feels that spirituality is some kind of an egoic empowerment expression, that it's about me. And not I, not the capital I, not the innermost self, but it's about me. And it's unfortunate because to limit spirituality to the expression of what I want to get in this world, what I want to achieve in this world, what's going to make me happy, is really, it's simply not enough. It's not enough to fulfill the promise of spirituality. It's really not. Is it some small part of it? Sure, absolutely. We have to start somewhere. But it's not the entirety of it. In yoga, there are these gifts called siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-E, a siddhi. And it's oftentimes translated as a perfection. And what it is a capability that a yogi achieves as they go along the path, perfecting their practices, investing their time and effort into their practices. And these siddhis, there are several of them, but they're kind of like supernatural powers almost. It's like to see the future, to know the past, to be able to make oneself as big as a mountain or as small as an atom, to be able to move the minds of others in a way that one wants to. Things like that, which is basically what the ego wants, is it not? The ego wants to be big and powerful as a mountain. The ego also wants to recoil into a false smallness. The ego wants to be able to move things at its own will, to attract people at its own will. In yoga, there's a warning. It says every yogi is going to experience these siddhis as they progress along their path, their spiritual path. Don't stop there. Don't even play with them. Just recognize them for what they are and leave them, because they're not the goal. And I love that warning is there. It's very, very clear. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's in so many of the different texts. It's in multiple Upanishads. It's a constant caution that just when you think you've got your ego under control, that's the dangerous point, because that's when you stop paying attention to the warning signs, and when you're vulnerable to get caught up in the games of the ego and the things that seem like they are aligned with your spiritual path, but actually, if they're abused or misused, they're not. They're what actually maintain the bondage of your suffering. But in the concept of spirituality in the world, there's no such warning. At least not one that comes consistently to people. There's no suggestion that if you are allowing yourself to see spirituality primarily as a vehicle to getting what you want, even happiness, the concept of happiness, and you stop there, when you start being happy, you're like, oh, I got what I want. Why do I need to continue self-correcting? Why do I need to go further? I've got what I want. That if you do that, if you stop there, you're stifling your own growth, and you have not even begun to unwrap the gift. All you're looking at is the wrapping paper. You have no idea what's inside. Spirituality is not meant to be solely an individual experience. I mean, it is an individual experience, because nobody can have your experience except for you. You walk through this life and you see the flower, you appreciate the flower for the reasons that you appreciate the flower. You appreciate the bee sting for the reasons why you appreciate the bee sting, or you don't. You appreciate what you appreciate for your own personal reasons. And those reasons are tied in very intimately with your own karmas, with the actions that you have taken in this life and previous lives, with the energies that you are here to reconcile, and with the lessons that you're here to learn. So yes, it's absolutely, there's a very individualistic part of it. But there's also a communal part of it. And that gets overlooked, because the ego looks at spirituality and says, how do I bend this to my will? Well, I know. We'll talk about self-empowerment. We'll make it all about the me, the little m me, the me. You ever see that cartoon with the pigeon? Or I guess it's a pigeon or a seagull, and he goes, me. Yeah? My son sent me the other day a little message, and he goes, I was down the boardwalk, and I got this little stuffed animal of a seagull with a french fry. Would you like it? And I started laughing, because all I heard was, me, mine. And so I said, if you don't find another home for it, yes, I would actually love it, because it made me smile, so, But this spirituality is not, it doesn't stop there. there's this whole big community aspect to it. And the community part of our spirituality is actually a necessity. It's a necessity for our healthy existence, that we come together in unison to uplift each other. That we bring forward the very best of ourselves in service of the alleviation of suffering. This is a necessity. Because if each one of us is not willing to give more than we take, to serve more than we expect to receive, then how on this goddess's green earth are we ever going to diminish the suffering experienced by all beings? Especially the unnecessary suffering, particularly the unnecessary suffering. So the community part of spirituality is not about, there's a very small part that's about, let's get together and do stuff. Let's go on a kayak trip down the river and appreciate nature. It's a part of it, is to have these beautiful experiences together. But that, again, there has to be a caution. Don't stop at the feel-good. Because if you stop at the feel-good, all you're doing is looking at the wrapping paper. You're not opening the gift. Because the greatest gift, and this has been said by so many spiritual teachers of all different traditions throughout time, the greatest gift is what you give, not what you receive. Healing comes to you the more that you offer healing to others. And you don't offer healing to others because you're some kind of healer. No. You offer healing to others because you no longer hurt them. Your actions are no longer intended to harm them. You're no longer a threat to them. Well, I was never a threat to them to begin with. How do you know? Did you ask them? Did you say, does my presence threaten you somehow? Because you have no idea what's in the mind of another. But when you're practicing spirituality, when you're in the thick of it, you recognize that you don't know really anything about anybody else and their trauma and what they're carrying, what their expectations or fears are. All you have to do is walk in a room and somebody could just be like, because they heard a door open. You don't know. You talk loudly, boisterously. You don't know how other people are going to receive that. So does it mean you don't walk in rooms or talk loudly or boisterously? No, that's not what it means. What it means is that through the thick of our spiritual practices, we cultivate within ourselves an intention of ahimsa, of non-harming. I do not have the intention to harm anybody. And that is the intention we walk through life with. And then Swami Shivananda said in one of his books, I believe it was, I can't think of the name of it now. Oh, it's the big book. It's like, 7,000 pages or something. The Mind. Easy title, right? The Mind, or The Power of the Mind. He says, when you set your heart and mind to not harming, it's obvious to other people. They see that. They feel it. They may not be able to logically acknowledge it. They may deny it, but they still feel it. And so they will come toward you. They will come toward you and they won't know why. They will also recoil because they're not accustomed to feeling comfortable, to feeling like they can trust. That's part of their work, is to do that. But on some deep level, they know that they don't have to fear you. And that's a relief to them. Even if they're struggling with it, it's still a relief to them. And the more within the community that are doing that work, taking the vow of ahimsa, the vow of non-harming, knowingly walking through this life with the intention of no harm, no violence, not going to do it, then the more relief that being receives, the healthier they become, the happier they become, because the relief brings contentment. And the more that they see that within the communities, the more they believe it actually exists, the less of a struggle it is for them to receive that gift. Does that make sense? So your spirituality is not just like feel-good stuff. Like, that's great, you know? Like, go take the art class that teaches you how to draw mandalas. It's a beautiful thing, you know? Get together with a bunch of friends. Create mandalas in your backyard out of natural things. It's a beautiful thing. But don't stop there. If you stop there, you haven't even begun. Have not even begun. And for those other things, you know, those other things that might sound a little woo-woo-y, but we all know they're very true. You know, don't stop there either. Don't get too invested in that. Because again, that's the wrapping paper. That's not the contents. What the contents are is what elevates your soul, your heart, and your mind to that place of unity. True unity. Absolute unity. Is that a lot? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Spirituality. I think sometimes in America, I don't know, I love this country, I really do. She's just the most amazing place with the most amazing people. And she's got some problems. She's got some big problems. And I really I intensely feel that one of her biggest problems has been twofold. The first is that she turned a blind eye to the insults, the insanity, and the injury caused by religion. She turned a blind eye to it. She denied it. She was cold to the people who were impacted by it. And then the second thing that she did, and it's communal. This is the nation. This is not just the government. It's the nation. It's all of us. The second thing she did was she consumerized spirituality. She made it profitable. So if you have a large swath of the community who feel that they have been, and who have been so injured by religion that there's a mass exodus, people are no longer investing in the religious teachings, and they're going to Barnes and Noble and buying the latest book on Wiccan practices or paganism or yoga or meditation or, you know, the do-it-yourself version of spirituality. And I'm not saying that all of that is out of this world, but there is a part of it that is. And we have, you know, I mean, I feel, it's my opinion, if we want to be healthy, we have to acknowledge that half of the stuff that's for sale in Barnes and Noble should be left there, you know. And it's difficult to tell you what half that is. You know, so I just don't go there anymore. But anyway, so there's this mass exodus of individuals, and where do they go? They go off to Barnes and Noble or some other bookstore, and they buy these books, and they're like, well, I'm going to make my own thing. And now I'm speaking from experience, because I cannot tell you over the years, particularly, let's say, the last 14 years, the number of people who have come for counseling, for advice, for guidance, because I left my religion because of the harm that was happening there. And I've tried this and I've tried this, and I got that book and I got this book, and I talked to that person, I talked to this person, and I just feel lost. I feel like I have no anchor. I feel like I have nothing to ground down into. what do I do? So turning a blind eye to the injuries being brought about by organized religion, not across the board. Somebody one time said to me, "You're anti-Catholic." I said, "I'm not anti-Catholic. I'm anti-harm." And there's a lot of it in the Catholic tradition. And I kind of feel like I can say that because I was raised a Catholic, So I kind of feel like I have a little inside scoop there, But that's not everybody's experience of it, right? Some people have had a beautiful experience within Catholicism. It's really supported them and allowed their heart to flourish. So when we look at it, we do need to acknowledge that it's not all bad. Nothing is all bad. It has a component of harm that has occurred, and it also has a component of goodness that has occurred. And in that, we're talking about people. We're talking about human beings. We're not talking about the teachings of Christ. We're talking about the people who are carrying those teachings, interpreting them according to the health or unhealth of their own ego. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because if you throw the baby out with the bathwater, you have nothing left to hold on to. Recognize the flaw of the people. The people who are saying, well, I'm healed, you're not healed, I can heal you. I walk in the opposite direction when I hear that. I say, no. Nope. You cannot heal me. I have to heal me. You can support me. You can guide me. You can maybe teach me something, but you cannot heal me. I have to heal me. Because no matter how many hands are laid upon a person, if that person doesn't want to receive, that person is not going to heal. So the harm comes from the ego of the human beings that are involved. It doesn't come from the teachings. There's not one religious or spiritual teaching in this world that tells you to hurt somebody. It's how it's been interpreted. Somebody might say, but what about what about the jihads and the Christian wars? And they say that was called for in the Bible. So I'm going to say something controversial right now. The Bible wasn't written by God. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. The Bible was written by who?
People.
By people interpreting what? Interpreting God. Therefore, the Bible is only as perfect as those people. Just like your computer and your phone are only as perfect as the people who made them. They may have some skill, they may have some insight, they may have some knowledge, but they don't have the whole truth because they're human beings. So whenever I see something like that, I always say to myself, the apostles came forward with these teachings and did the best they could at the time that they wrote it down. And some of them weren't even apostles, right? So some of the books of the Bible are written by individuals who had a firsthand experience with Christ, but some of the books are not written by them. They were written hundreds of years later by people who received the stories through time. So I don't mean to be insulting anybody's tradition or religion. I'm just saying these are like historical facts. These are historical facts. The harm comes from people, not from God, not from the goddess. As a matter of fact, whatever tradition does state that there are words that came out of God's mouth, goddess's mouth, that there are teachings that come directly from that, those teachings are never violent. They would never say to you, hurt somebody else. No. They would say to you, your responsibility within this life, if you choose it, because you've been given free will to say no thank you. Your responsibility in this life is to know yourself. It's not to feed your ego. It's not to find some kind of blissful happiness where everything is all peaches and cream and runs smoothly and nobody irritates you. That has nothing to do with it. It's to know yourself. And by knowing yourself, to know all other beings also. to see yourself in all and to see all in yourself. And then to go even beyond that and to see God within all beings. And by God, I don't have a gender that I'm putting there. It's that consciousness, that sacredness of the universe. To see that in all things everywhere. And that's a big ticket item for one lifetime. That's why in this tradition, there's reincarnation. Because you need to have at least 1 million lifetimes to be able to work that through. It's not going to happen in 70 years or 80 years or 90 years or however long we're blessed to have on this earth. Unless there's a very special circumstance. It just ain't going to happen. No. So don't stop with the ego trap. Go beyond it. Say, no, thank you. Say, no, thank you. I know that there's something even more precious, even more true, more profound. And so sometimes we have to cultivate within ourselves a compassionate discipline, which is a really important part of our spiritual practice. Compassionate discipline, the ability to say no thank you. Somebody comes along to you and says, I'm going to give you this humongous gift. You're going to have whatever you want in this life. You'll have the ability to attract all kind of money. You ever see those books at Barnes & Noble that say, do these steps right here and you'll become the richest person in the world? You'll attract all the money to you, all the fame, all the fortune. Say no thank you. Because that's not even the wrapping paper. That's somebody telling you there's a gift out there somewhere. And, and I have the gift to give to you. Say no thank you. Nope. Not interested. Sometimes we have to practice that compassionate discipline of saying no thank you so that we can come to the place of true contentment and truth. There's a beautiful story of a king. He was the richest king in the entire world. He had kingdoms and all over. He had more money than his people could count for him. And he had people sitting there in his areas where he kept all of his riches, counting and counting and counting. And some people are doing this for their whole life and they still haven't counted all of it. They just keep counting and that's how much this person had. He had armies and he had herds of cows and horses and he had so much. And he had stress. His stress came from the fear that somebody was going to take something from him. Maybe one of his counters was going to steal something precious. Maybe his family didn't really love him. They just enjoyed the riches. Maybe his wife was out with somebody she really loved because all she wanted from him was the fame and the fortune that came along with being his wife. So he had these stressors, and it started to get really bad to the point where he couldn't sleep at night. All he did was worry. What if I lose it all? Who would I be if I don't have this? What if somebody tries to take it from me? So he puts the word out to all of the spiritual teachers and religious teachers in all of his kingdoms. He says, one of you come forward and tell me what to do to relinquish this, whatever I'm going through, so I can get a good night's sleep. They all came forward making suggestions to him, None of it worked. So he puts another call out. He puts a call out to kind of the elite in the community. And he says, somebody come forward and tell me this. If you come forward and tell me this, I will give you this ruby which is worth more than you could ever spend. So they come forward, and they're like, oh, I want that ruby. Try this. Here, try this tincture. Here, try this tea. Here, try this. None of it worked. So in his frustration and his desperation, he puts a call out to every single living being. And he said, whoever comes forward with the answer to my stress and my worry, I will give you this ruby and your own kingdom. People lined up. Have you tried this? 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 Tried it. Next. Goes through the whole line. There's one person left. A beggar of sorts. A person who people didn't really want around because they associated them with being low caste. Torn, tattered clothing. This person did have a gift, though. They had a gift that they would make rings out of whatever they could find, carve them out of rocks, or if they got a little bit of metal, they'd make them out of metal. He comes walking up all crotchety with a cane and a slight hunch in his back. And the king looks at him and he goes, "What are you going to give me that all these other people have not been able to give me? What are you going to give me?" And so the man pulls out from his pocket a little bag. And he says, "With all due respect, this is for you. It will take care of what ails you." And the king is like kind of laughing in a bit of a mockery. And he opens up the bag and he goes, "What's in here that I don't already have?" And he pulls out a ring, silverish ring. And he says, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And he says, "Good sir, please put it on your finger." So he puts it on his finger. And he goes, "Nothing's changed." And he goes, "This is the instruction for the ring. When you feel the stress coming to you, look at the ring, read it, and then turn it one time. And then read it again." And the king said, "What?" He goes, "Please just humor me. I'm nothing but a poor, uneducated soul. I'm just trying to support you somehow because I love you. You're my beloved king. Please just try it." So the king said, "Fine. I'm so stressed right now. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. It will all pass because it's all temporary." Guess who got the ruby in the kingdom? And then guess who said no thank you? The king got the answer he needed. The man was offered the ruby and the kingdom for giving the king the answer. And the man said, "No thank you. I don't want to be you. I don't want to be sitting there wondering who's going to steal from me, who's going to lie to me, who's going to cheat on me. No thank you. The key is right there. This too shall pass." But it takes a compassionate discipline to be able to accept the simplicity of that and the complexity of it. It's so simple, it almost sounds impossible. It's like, be serious. There's got to be something else. Like, it can't just be that. It all has to be somebody else's fault. It can't be so simple that if I take radical personal responsibility over myself, that's the answer. It can't be that. And it's so complicated because it requires that each and every one of us work through all of those layers of conditioning that we have had for however many moments we have been alive. And not just this life. All that conditioning that we need to have, the discipline to work through all those levels of conditioning so that we have the ability to cultivate within ourselves the courage, the strength, the willpower, the foresight, the ability to say no thank you to the trap and yes please to the answer. What do you think? Yeah. Any questions or reflections so far? Yes, Lena.
So just as I was walking in, you started talking, my eyes lit up. You were talking about the creating no harm. And I really believe in that. I was having a conversation where the question became, how do you know when you're not creating harm? Because, you could be giving, helping someone in a time of need. And how do you, know when if you're committed to not creating that harm, how do you know that you're not creating harm? Sometimes, things don't turn out the way, you kind of think, okay, I'm going to help this person.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes awry.
So it's a really great question. And there's a couple of answers to it. Because there's levels, So the first level, they actually talk about in the teachings of yoga. They say, the wise one knows when it is appropriate to give and when it is appropriate not to. And what that means is, on a really basic level, you don't give to people just because they ask you. Like, somebody comes to you and, for the umpteenth time and says, I need you to give me this. And they still have made no effort to get it for themselves. You don't give that to them. But a lot of us do, don't we? We do because why? We don't want them to be mad at us. We want them to like us. We don't want them to say something bad about us. So we give inappropriately. We give out of fear, out of insecurity, and out of ego. So any kind of giving that is out of those things is harm. But when a person comes to you and they say, I'm hungry, I lost my job, I don't have the ability to feed myself right now. And that person has never shown themselves to you to be anything dishonest, or they have a truthful look on their face. You don't really know. It's not wrong to give them food. It's not wrong to give them a couple of dollars to go get themselves some food. It's not wrong. They haven't shown themselves to be anything other than honest with you, because you don't know who they are. And since you don't know who they are, you should not pass false judgments on people. So if you're able to, you give them a little food. You give them $1 or $2, whatever you can do. Then they come back to you the next time, and they know that you gave them food, and they say, give me food again, you gave it to me last time. No, there's actually a shelter right down the street that has hot meals for everybody. I'll give you the address, and you can go there. They'll support you. When I was in India at Swamiji's ashram years and years ago, we were out with, I think it was Poonam Mataji, doing some shopping for a very large event that was happening, where we were actually bringing people in from outside, from the streets, feeding them, and also taking bags of food out to the villages and handing them out to the women and the children and the elder men. And this woman approached Poonam Mataji and said to her, give me some money. I know you're from the ashram. Give me some money. You have to give me some money. And Poonam Mataji looked at her and said, I don't have to give you anything. If you're hungry, come to the ashram, we'll feed you. And the woman said, well, I don't want to go to the ashram. It's too far down the street. Give me some money and I'll go buy my own food. She said, no, but I'll give you some rice. Let's go get you some rice. No, you buy me a 50-pound bag of rice. I'm not going to buy you a 50-pound bag of rice. So you see where I'm going with that, right? Like, it's all in the reasonableness of the request. And it's also in your response versus your reaction. So if your reaction is out of fear, out of ego, then it's not the appropriate reaction. If your reaction is out of compassion and understanding, then that's the correct reaction. It's very difficult, though, to navigate that sometimes and to know the difference. So that's the first thing. Don't give when it's inappropriate as best you can. And the outcome is not yours. The outcome is not yours. So let's just say that somebody they came to you, they said, you don't know who this person is. They were a homeless person. They said, I'm very hungry. Could you support me and give me some food? and you say, well, yeah, I'll go over here to, Salad Works. I'll get you a nice salad. Oh, thank you so much. That would be so wonderful. Would it be too much to ask for hot tea? No, of course I'll get you some hot tea too. You go over there, you give them the food. There's something wrong with the food, they get sick. There was a harm that came from that goodness. Is that your fault? No. The outcome doesn't belong to you, so don't try to take ownership over it. You treated this person with respect. You treated them with kindness. You didn't give this to them out of your own fear or your own ego. You identified with this person's suffering and wanted to alleviate it. Now, that there was an issue is not your fault or your problem. But have compassion, of course. But you don't own that. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna very specifically, you have a right to the work only. You do not have a right to the outcome. But when you take ownership over the outcome, it becomes yours. Karma is sticky that way. So part of it is also knowing what belongs to you and what doesn't. So knowing when to give, knowing when not to give. Now, navigating the waters of a family member, for example, somebody in the family maybe, or a close friend who is constantly asking you to support them in ways that are not appropriate, but you care for this person. You love this person, and you're afraid that if you don't give them what it is that they're asking for, that it's somehow going to mean that you're not loving them. You don't want them to think you don't love them. They don't care that you love them. If they're taking advantage of you, your love is the last thing they're worried about. Exploiting you is what they're worried about. So you need to be sharp and recognize when you're being exploited, because that's a form of self-harm. Allowing yourself to be exploited is a form of self-harm. And allowing them to exploit you is a form of harming them, because you're giving them the ability to do it. You're saying yes. So that's when you got to build up some courage. And no matter how difficult it is, no matter how many emotions it brings to the surface, you have to know how to say no. And they may say, well, I'm going to stomp my feet. I'm going to scream in your face. I'm never going to talk to you again. I don't love you. You don't love me. It's all reaction. It's all ego. If that's the reaction that they're going to have, let them have their reaction. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. I acknowledge that 100%. I had some tough moments as a parent where I had to put my foot down and say, no. And if that is the way that you're going to speak to me, if that's the way that you're going to approach me, then do not call me again until you've changed your mind about what our relationship is. Hung up the phone, cried for 3 weeks. I'm a horrible mother, da 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 da. But 4 weeks later the phone rang. And the person at the other end of that phone wasn't my daughter. No, there's a different story there. My son said to me, he said, Mom, it's me. I'm just calling you to let you know that I heard you. And I've had some time to sit with this, and I didn't call you sooner because I just needed to sit with this and to figure out how to get myself together. And I'm not ready to talk yet, but I will be soon. And I just wanted to tell you that I love you, and that's all I want to say to you. And I said, okay, I love you too. And I hung up the phone. I cried for another 3 weeks. Sometimes they don't call, though. You can't control that. You just can't. Yeah. So you don't worry about the outcome, even though you're going to anyway. you know. But it really is all about your intention. Is it your intention to hurt them? No. If it's not your intention to hurt them, it's not your intention to hurt them. But you do have to have the wherewithal to be honest with yourself. Because sometimes we might say things like, well, it's not my intention to hurt them, but man, I showed them, didn't I? Who are you lying to now? You know? The ego is very tricky. Very, very tricky. Very, very tricky. So we have to really be aware. And if we're not practicing mindfulness practices, awareness practices, if we're not practicing witnessing, paying attention on purpose without involvement, then how will we ever cultivate the ability within ourselves to know what it is that we're actually seeing, to understand what it is that we are actually doing and why? We won't. We'll only ever be caught up in that dichotomy. Well, I'm not doing it to hurt them, but I did show them, didn't I? There'll always be that but, that ego that slides in there. So what does it require? It requires a humble heart, humility. It requires a lot of humility, a lot of humility. Why does it require humility? Because humility is what allows you to stop before you get to the but. I don't have an intention to harm them. Period. And even if you're not saying it out loud to your friend or whoever's sitting next to you, even if you're thinking it, but I really did show them, didn't I? Then you have not cultivated humility or courage or strength. You're still working on the ego level. So there has to be a practice in place, a process in place in your life that allows you to cultivate the humility to be able to genuinely care, to genuinely intend no harm without the but. And that's a lifelong thing. That's not something that you do overnight. You say, that's it. I'm so inspired by this talk. I'm changing my whole life starting right now. And tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, the phone will ring. I've been trying. It's not working. Like, how many hours has it been? So there was this beautiful person who graduated from my yoga teacher training many years ago. And as part of our yoga teacher training at that point, because we lived in a very populated area over in New Jersey, we would arrange for internships for our teachers so that they could go and teach and get basically a job at another yoga studio. And so we had a whole network that we worked with, and so we arranged this opportunity for this wonderful graduate. She goes and she teaches. And she about a week later, she comes over to say hi, and she's like, oh my gosh, I just love it there. It's just such a great community. Thank you for introducing me to them. And, I have a question. And I said, okay, sure. She goes, well, it's about teaching. I said, well, what? That's fine. Ask. What's up? She goes, well, it's a problem. I said, that's okay. She said, well, I don't really know how to say this, but I feel kind of like I'm teaching from the sequences that you gave us in YTT. I'm teaching the sequence. And I kind of feel like the students are bored with it. Can I shake it up? Can I add some other things into it? I mean, I know that I haven't taught for the 3 months post-graduation yet. And you strongly suggest waiting those 3 months before you start adding and taking away so that you really have an understanding of the sequence. But what do I do? They're bored. I just listened. And she was done. I said, okay, I just have one question for you. And then I can give you an answer. She said, yeah? I said, how many times have you taught that class? Once. how on earth do you know they're bored? Or is it just that you're bored? And she went, fine. And then we laughed, had some tea, and it was know what belongs to you and what doesn't. That includes your boredom, your impatience, your expectations, your impressions, your opinions, your attitudes, your judgments. It includes all of it. Know what belongs to you and what doesn't. And don't blame it on other people. When it's just that even after, 260 hours of intense training, you still are working on patience. You're still working on it, After a lifetime. She was not a young person either, She was older than I am. And we never have it all. We never have the entirety of it perfected. We're always working on something. And spirituality makes an allowance for that. It does. It actually, if I could look at the two and say, I would say that the tendency, it's not the rule, right? Because there's some amazing religious leaders out there that are so profoundly wise and compassionate and wonderful. But there is a tendency in religion that you're not doing enough. You're not giving enough money. You're not attending enough services. You're not doing enough. And there is this idea of, say it a certain way, you're a sinner. So you're also not good enough. Spirituality looks at it a different way. And it says, you're in process. Do you have things about you that you have to self-correct? Of course you do. We all do. Now take the responsibility to do it. Of course it's going to take time. It isn't going to happen by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock or by tonight at 5. It doesn't work that way. You're going to think you've corrected it, and then you're going to find another situation that you haven't even thought of yet where that's going to come back into play again, and you'll just have to continually correct, continually adjust, continually refine. And it's okay, because that's the purpose of your life, isn't it? It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you less than. It doesn't make you anything other than human. It makes you a human in process. And so to me, in my humble opinion, that is the defining factor between kind of organized religion and a more spiritual approach, is that the spirituality is big enough to hold space for you, to learn and to grow and to evolve and to involve. And sometimes we find that the organized religion is not so compassionate. And at the same point, it is quite compassionate. It just depends on what it is that you're talking about. Does that make sense? So it's not so forthright, I'm not anti-religion at all. I think that, there's some aspects of religion that are just absolutely beautiful and stunning and wonderful, and the work that they do in the world can be so profound and supportive. But I also find that the people can be so harmful. The truest thing about spirituality, though, too, because there's people out there who call themselves spirituals, call themselves gurus, call themselves this, call themselves that, and all they really want is your money, your attention, to buy their book, to exploit. So it's not the teaching that's the problem. It's the people. Don't be one of those people. On a big level or a small level. Just don't be one of those people. Whenever someone speaks to you and you feel that there's harm in what's being said, turn yourself off to it. And look to the teachings, not to the person, because the person is not perfect. But the teachings are, when we receive them in a pure way, without any egoic embellishment. And I do think, truly, it's my opinion, I opine, that religion tries to do that. It does. but the people get in the way. And spirituality tries to do that. It truly does. But the people get in the way. Don't be one of those people. I'm going to do a time check. Good time check. I'm getting better. Questions or reflections? I hope I answered your question, Lena.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, good. Anybody else like to share anything?
The compassion with the discipline. I think that was a big one.
Yeah. We're too busy being nice. We think that nice is compassion, and it's not. They're really, really very different things. You know, compassion has a relationship to empathy. And that's an identification, a relation, being able to relate on a level of suffering or joy. I can relate to your tears. I can relate to your laughter. I can relate because as a human being, we all have suffering. We all have joy, and we all have the in-between. You know, so compassion and empathy are the relationship. Nice is fear, formality, because I'm told I'm supposed to. Because I'm afraid that if I don't, what you're going to say about me, think about me, say, do. I don't know. You know, nice is a strategy. Compassion is not a strategy. It's a relationship. Yeah. So compassionate discipline. Discipline is like nice. It is a strategy to get you to fall in line. Discipline can be cold and hard, impersonal. Discipline can be harm. And as a matter of fact, just look at history and you'll find out that it is. People try to impose discipline on people all the time. Look at what happened with the indigenous populations in this part of the world and other parts of the world. The imposition of discipline has stolen cultures from people, languages from people, practices from people, identities from people. Would compassionate discipline ever do that? No. No. So compassionate discipline is what we cultivate within ourselves that allows us to see the struggle in each and every one of us and to recognize the part that I play in that struggle. What am I contributing to it? Am I contributing more harm? Am I neutral? Am I part of the solution? And then stepping into the honesty of that and doing something. Changing myself. It's not like looking at a homeless person and saying, I have compassionate discipline for you. You're homeless and it's all your fault. So my suggestion to you is go get a job. That's not compassionate discipline. That's BS. There's so many levels to homelessness. There's so many complexities to homelessness. The compassionate discipline, one example is that you see a homeless person and you've been told your whole life that they're a problem. And you know that not to be true. So you're going to stop yourself in your own tracks from having that thought of blame and belittling. And instead, you're going to make the choice of saying, have you had food today? Can I get you something to eat? Are you interested in knowing where the shelter is? They just opened one locally. Or maybe the decision is to not say or do anything at all, is to keep your mouth shut if there's only harm that's going to come out of it. And to just pray that at some point in your own life, you're able to evolve beyond those judgments that have been handed down to you that have no validation, for you to have those judgments, because you don't know. You don't know. That's like, and this is always a little bit of a thing, but Somebody recently said to me that they overheard somebody talking, or they were talking to somebody, and they said, oh, that place talking about the ashram, well, they're a cult. And this person I know very well, and they were actually really angry. And I said, don't be angry. That's just their ignorance. Have they ever been here? No, they've never been here. They've never met you. They've never met anybody from the community there. And this is what they say. And I said, but you have to understand something. They're programmed that way. They don't even know they don't know. But what's more important is that there are also things that I don't know that I don't know. And the same for each and every one of you. So the compassionate discipline is what causes us to step back and to say, what don't I know? What do I think I know that I actually have no idea about? And let me correct that about myself, so I'm not jumping into that judgment, jumping into that place of calling names, making, yeah. It's hard though. It really, really is. But the compassionate discipline is about going in, not lashing out. It's a great, great question. No. Any other thoughts for today? Yes?
In my past, I have probably caused more harm than I would like to admit. And I've done a lot of self-work in the past couple of years. But I am reminded by some of the people that I love of the harm that I've caused. And they're not wrong. And I get it often. And it doesn't feel good. And I don't know how to shut it down or control my emotions when I'm reminded of where the journey started.
Yeah. So, first of all, my heart goes out to you for your honesty and for accepting the responsibility of your past.
Absolutely.
There's always more than one person in a relationship. And you can't take authority or ownership over their process in all of this. You can only take ownership over your own. And you're doing that. Now, as far as looking into the past and being constantly reminded of mistakes that you've made and errors and judgment and harm that you have caused, there's two things that you can say to that. And the first is apologized. I know that. I'm accepting complete responsibility for that. And I apologize. And I'll apologize for as often as I have to, because I have accepted responsibility for it. And I understand that you're still working through your ability to accept my apology. So I'll just keep apologizing for it. And my prayer for you is that eventually you can accept my apology and know that I really mean it. And then the second thing, if that was the second thing, I don't know, maybe it's a third thing, is I know, is to recognize also, and this is not in place of that, this is additional to that the mistakes you've made in the past, the harms you've caused, the moments that you have experienced in that regard have been what have propelled you into the work that you're doing now. So you can have some compassion for yourself that you had to take the hard route. You didn't take the quick route. You took the tough route. Because now you're in this place of growth. And it's a beautiful place to be. And you've actually always been in a place of growth, but you're in this place right now of profound growth. And you're also navigating the consequences of the past as that wave continues to roll forward. You recognize, and I know you do, that just because you knowingly are on this path, you've always been on this path, but you are knowingly on this path now, doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it gets all kinds of peachy keen and cool and no, and it doesn't get smooth. As a matter of fact, for a little while, it gets harder. It gets harder to say. It gets harder because we in choosing the personal responsibility, we have also chosen to accept ownership over those things that we have done. And that means humility in that. Acceptance. So cultivate strength within yourself, cultivate acceptance of yourself for all the flaws and all of the perfections, for all of it. Cultivate deep acceptance, deep compassion for yourself, because you're suffering just as much as they are. You always have, and you probably always will, because that's our humanness. And then understand that they have a process they have to go through. Yeah. Let's sit tall and close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And maybe we send out a little prayer. May all beings everywhere discover within themselves the peace that always exists, that's waiting there for them. May they accept the responsibility of their own actions. May they grow from harmful tendencies into compassionate tendencies. May we each find the ability within ourselves to love so profoundly, to be so profoundly full of faith, so profoundly full of interest and curiosity at what lies within, the light that lies within, that we no longer have any interest in harming at all. We only have an interest in being a beacon of light for anybody, for everybody, and for all beings everywhere, including ourselves. We'll lift our voices in one Om, taking a breath in. Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today, for being part of this conversation, this ongoing conversation. Wonderful. If you have not had brunch yet and are going to have that now, enjoy.